the outrage that our politicians generate, or regurgitate, I should say, when someone fires back is breathtaking in its hypocrisy.
How dare you,
It's
right?
like, don't you realize we're the ones in the white hats? Maybe Americans should all be wearing white hats from now on.
Right, because clearly people who fight back are cowards. Okay.
Right. Well, that's how Bill Maher lost his TV show. After September 11th, there was someone on his show, or he was listening to someone who had called them cowards, the attackers on September 11th, and he said, there are many very bad things you can say about them, but you certainly can't say that people who get onto an airplane and kill themselves crashing it into a building are technically cowards.
There's a courage to their convictions that I wish some of our politicians had.
Right.
Well, I don't.
Well,
I'm sorry. Did that sound wrong?
That sounded very wrong. Your show on network TV is going to be canceled now.
I don't think that came out the way you meant it. That's for sure.
No, it actually did.
It came out exactly the way he meant it.
Now, for me, as a communications guy, as a PR guy, and I hate to oversimplify, but it seems like it really does come down to, at the end of the day, PR. And speaking a little bit about Iraq, do you think that was a game changer in the way, or not really Iraq itself, but the lead up to Iraq, the build up to Iraq, and what came out about the build up to Iraq? Do you think that was a game changer as far as there's just no palette for quote unquote war right now? I mean, people are reluctant. It was when it first started, it was like 9% supported any kind of action in Syria. You could probably figure 9% of people work for the military-industrial complex, right?
That's probably true.
Those are your people who are. But it just seems like there is, and we talked about last week about strange bedfellows. Across the board, there is no palette for this, it seems.
Well, what's astonishing, we now have two distinct generations of American men and women who fought in these police actions and with devastating results. And that's the veterans of the Vietnam conflict and the veterans of the variety of incarnations of Gulf War. So we've got both fathers and sons, or in some case grandfathers and sons, who are agreed in one thing. They may hate each other's music, they may despise each other's taste in baseball or football teams, but they understand the total futility of anything involved with American foreign policy as it interacts with police actions. And they are living testament to that in the terms of broken lives, broken bodies, and ruined families. And so as these two generations stare at each other every day, there's the recognition that the people in charge are just bankrupt on every level.
Yeah, or at the very least, the people in charge need to be listened to very closely. We need to parse what they're saying. We need to do our own research and see if what they're saying is the truth. And that's a positive change. I mean, the Iraq War, there was much too much public groundswell behind what was being told to us.
Well, they co-opted the emotions of 9/11.
Yeah, they did.
They did, and
and that was planned. That was planned in advance. Not
right.
that I don't believe at all that 9/11 was planned in advance, but it's known. Are you familiar with the document produced by the Project for the New American Century?
Elaborate.
A cohort of essentially the neocons during the Clinton administration put together a several hundred-page document about what they thought should be happening in the New American Century and how Clinton and or subsequent administrations should be working to make this happen. And it was all about maintaining our supremacy, hegemony, exceptionalism, and whatnot. And there's a key passage in it that talks about how we need to establish a large permanent base somewhere in the Middle East so we can have an influence there. And it would be extremely helpful for us if some major incident happened that gave us an excuse to invade. And that we should look for such a thing and take advantage of it.
So this
I don't know whether Clinton read it and said no way, or if he simply never came up with an opportunity that he felt was appropriate for it. We can't read Clinton's mind at this point. But we do know that the Bush administration, well, you'd see things that had nothing to do with that.
Hand me the Purell.
Pay-per-view. Oh, come on. People would pay good money for that.
As long as I don't have to see Hillary Clinton naked.
You probably wouldn't see much of that in there.
Janet Reno naked.
Ooh. But back to our good old Project for a New American Century. The Bush administration had people in the administration who had been helping draft that document. So the planes hit various important targets of ours. We were upset, and immediately the discussion started. Great, now it's time to invade.
So this was the articulate version of never let a good crisis go to waste.
Exactly.
And by the way, at least we had a man like Lincoln Chafee in the Senate to vote against Iraq.
Rhode Island's
Teflon.
That's right.
Rhode Island's own rebel without a clue.
But,
Teflon rebel.
You could describe that as a blind squirrel getting a nut once in a while, or you could describe it as, he's a man of strong principles on a few key issues, and he stood up for them. It's either way. In my opinion, it was the right vote, and I was proud of him for that.
I think we should be proud.
To me, take the old protest line, and fill in the blanks. Blank lied, people died.
Yeah.
You really can make Mad Libs out of that.
Yeah.
which is a sad thing. They're the sad libs, actually.
Right. So to your question, Tony, have Americans had... I don't think there's any less resolve in the United States than in any other time in American history to reacting to a true external crisis. All right? I think Americans would come together in a heartbeat. All right? On the other hand, I don't think there's a time in American history when we've been more cynical about perceived or self-inflicted crisis. And people are more highly educated. They're bitter. And again, too many lives have been affected.
They're broke.
I think you would have to stretch hard to meet someone who hasn't had a very close family member involved in any one of the conflicts we just described.
Right.
And they haven't seen firsthand all the different levels of damage, and none of it had to be.
Right.
Now, I'm not to toot my own horn, but I'm a pretty popular guy, So
you are a popular guy, Tony.
I have talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of people about this very subject, and I can think of one person who was for military intervention, and that was because they actually had family members and friends that still live in Israel. So they're afraid that it would spread to Israel, and Israel would get involved, and that's why they were for some kind of intervention. And everybody else I talked to said we should stay home.
Because when we look at any one of our politicians, and at this point, the unanimity of this statement is astonishing. We believe none of them. Whether it be Boehner, whether it be Reid, whether it be Pelosi, whether it be, pick either side. Eric Cantor.
It's another Mad Lib.
I believe in none of them. I don't trust any of them. They all, in the car business, one of the oldest lines is, how do you know when a politician's lying? His lips are moving. and never, I think you would have to go back really to the era of Jackson and the early years of America to find a level of just disgust and distrust of all of these people. I mean, look at Jack Reed, our own senator. Does anyone actually believe him on anything he says when, in fact, you can actually get him to commit to an idea? And by the way, our own Rhode Island congressional delegation, senators and congressmen alike, are both right on the same page. They're still formulating their opinions.
That's scary.
They're still thinking about it. On the other hand, I think they're still thinking about the original goal. I don't think these people are capable, to come out with an opinion. I don't think they've got the emotional bravery to do it.
They're still trying to figure out the last thing.
In some cases, they might be trying to read the tea leaves or see which way the wind blows or whatever cliche you'd like to see.
Especially this close to an election.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I think it actually helps us to have some senators who have not committed publicly one way or the other, because the longer we can wait before having the actual vote, the more time it lets the brinksmanship play out. We have Obama. You can.
If they were doing it for that reason, they were doing it for that reason, I'd agree with you.
We don't know what reason they're doing it for, but it's productive regardless. It's better for us to not have X number of senators already committed for a yes vote. But when we don't want a yes vote.
There was a time, when particularly in the Senate, when Rhode Island had a fine tradition of United States senators. I mean, and regardless of whether you agreed with their personal politics, you had Chafee the Elder, you had Pell, generations before that of statesmen that came out of this tiny little city-state that stood for something.
Right.
And again, you may violently disagree with it, but they held to their principles. They were able to elucidate on their principles, and you walked away with the sense that there was leadership there.
And what's interesting to me about those two examples in particular is that you're not talking about populists who understood the common man firsthand. You're talking about a couple of people who, came from the cultural elite, whose families presumably made it clear to them that public service is an honorable thing to do and a way to pay back
Right.
for the privileges you have.
And
we don't have that anymore.
They seem to actually care about what they were doing.
Yeah.
Kind of like this show.
Yeah,
What sets this show apart and my show and some other things is that we actually care about what we're doing.
Part of it's because we're not being paid. No one's throwing lobbyist money at us.
That's true.
And if there are any lobbyists out there, I want you to know I am for sale. And at a spectacularly bargain basement price.
Yeah, if there are lobbyists on the other side, I'm for sale as well. We want to keep the argument going here.
Are there lobbyists at Building 19?
No, but Claiborne Pell will be forever remembered for the Pell Grants.
But he was so much more, too.
Yeah, he was so much more. But think about it. His signature issue is making sure people who he never bumped into in his ordinary everyday life, unless he sought them out, that they and their children would have opportunities to go to school.
Who could otherwise never, ever afford a college education.
Right.
I don't think you'd see that today.
Is there anybody like that?
I don't know if there's anybody like that on the horizon, and I think the current crop of Senate millionaires they have their hands out.
Well,
most of them are getting rich in office. They aren't necessarily rich before getting elected.
By the way, time for a shameless plug. Next week's show, we're going to have our first candidate on board, Jonathan Maciel, who is running for the United States Congress as an independent. We're looking forward to this because here at our show, we're a handicap-free zone. What I mean by that is we are not going to engage in the politics of discussing why someone does something to win. We're going to discuss why they should win or lose. We're going to just focus on their ideas, not
ideas
how
and
their
issues.
ideas are going to affect the polls.
This time last year, probably a little later than this time last year, I talked to a guy quite a few times on the air, a guy named David Vogel, who was in that same situation, 1st Congressional District, ran as an independent, did just a fantastic job. And as far as I'm concerned, for a guy running with almost no money as an independent, did very respectfully at the polls. Just a guy who had a plan, had at least something to put out there.
Oh, I remember David Vogel. I voted for him in his first election. He was running for Providence City Council as a Green Party candidate. He had a lot of interesting ideas, and he cared a lot about the neighborhood. He basically walked the neighborhood several times, ringing doorbells. I spoke to him 2 or 3 times, or him or one of his volunteers 2 or 3 times. The other candidates couldn't be bothered, and surprise, surprise, David Vogel won.
See, I don't understand why a guy like that, with those ideas in that situation, doesn't try to start. Well, I mean, in that situation he did, but why do people jump into first time running for a federal office or running for governor instead of, I mean, if they do care about the community as much as they claim, starting off on the local level, town council, things of that nature.
My theory is ego.
Especially lawyers. And, I have some great friends that are lawyers, great guys, they do a great job, but, man, the lawyers just want to go for the federal seats as an entry-level position, and that makes people nervous.
Yeah, as it should.
Well, because they're... and I wish I could take credit for this line, but I can't. Someone once said to me, public service is supposed to be about people who want to help lives, not get one.
Right.
And if you look at the, and it's interesting because he's taken a couple of very populist views, surprisingly. But we've got a judge right now who was appointed by Senator Jack Reed et al., who was a huge campaign contributor. I called Senator Reed's office. I called Senator Reed's office at the time, and I plan on following up on this call periodically, and asked him for a price list. And
can I get your media kit?
No, and it's very straightforward. I mean, I probably can't afford a federal judgeship, but listen, a clerkship at the EPA, I'll go with it. If that's a $4 or $5 grand contribution, I'm all set.
Probably all the free weed you could get your hands on, too.
That works.
Confiscate that.
That works. But, ultimately, these are all people who are engaged in shameless career promotion. Mm-hmm. That's how we have Sherbet Whitebread, the whitest man alive, as United States Senator. He, to me, is the ultimate perversion of the legacy of Claiborne Pell. Because on one hand, you had Claiborne Pell, who comes from a very wealthy background, who did things because they were the right things to do. Again, irrelevant whether you agreed or disagreed with him, you knew he was a man of principle. As I